Okay, I'll call the meeting of the Senate Election Law Municipal Affairs Committee to order. Our first bill is House Bill 164, and I'd ask the Senator to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I introduced House Bill 164 FN. Senator Representative Alexander was unable to make it. He called me yesterday and asked me just to introduce the bill for him, and he'll provide some written testimony later.
Hey. And going right to the list. Josh?
Good morning, Senators. And for the record, my name is Joshua Kella, previous state rep. I was the original prime sponsor of this legislation back in 2024, and with Representative Alexander as a co-sponsor. And since I'm no longer in the House, he is pushing this forward for me and with me. And he reached out to me to ask that I come and give you some information about this legislation, kind of the goal and history of it, so that that you guys can have what you need to decide. This legislation was started before, obviously, 2024, working with the Secretary of State's office and the NHMA on trying to get some way to address two things. One is the burden that municipalities have on fulfilling right to know requests, and also the transparency to the public. A lot of these right to know documents are just in boxes and filing cabinets, stored far away, and create a burden on the town to try and find and locate and sift through all of those documents, and two, for the actual requester to go and possibly now incur costs of actually looking that stuff up. So what we have proposed is a website to be maintained at the state archive under the archivist's direction, kind of standardizing and digitizing all of these documents at the they would be digitized at the local level and given to the archivist, and that would, according to this, if they did it in the way that the archivist needed, that they would no longer need to keep those physical records on there for everything that they've digitized. So that could, free up space and preserve these long term. And also, the archivist would have this publicly available website that people could get this information without making, a written request and going down to town hall or whatever. They could do it, from their comfort of their phone or whatever at any time of day. And that was kind of the idea. There's also there's a person at the in the state archivist, the local government records manager. They are going to be kind of in charge of the website, but also kind of support for the local municipalities on the proper way of keeping, storing, and digitizing those records, just being an asset to the municipalities. This legislation has passed the Senate and the House in prior years, but the real stumbling block has been the small amount of money that is for the actual spin up of the website, which is about $40,000, if I remember my numbers correctly, and then the actual employment of that records manager. And so it comes out to be about $150,000. And so it's just been, the budget is tight, and so it's been kind of waiting for us to be able to find the money to be able to do this. And so it has come back for your guys' consideration and hopefully your support. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Josh, for your testimony. So if a right to know went to the municipality, they would forward them to the website for that information?
So yes, thank you for the question. So as part of this, the only way that they would be able to not have the documents there at the municipality is that they offer a free way to access that website from within their municipality. So yes, they would just direct them to the website, say, hey, here's your free option. And we've uploaded that document that you've requested or are interested in to the website, and they would go and look that up for themselves.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Additional questions from senators? Senator Glenn.
So isn't it, I'm trying to think, it's 91A request issue, right? So number one, you'd have to make sure 100% of all towns' documents are sent to the website. Otherwise, there's always going to be a potential for a 91A request locally. That will now involve not only the state paper records, but as well as the archivist records. Would that be accurate? Am I thinking this through right?
Thank you for the question. Yes. So it's not a mandate on the municipalities to say, hey, you have to digitize all your records, right? This is an option for the municipalities to kind of reduce their load going forward, right? If you upload it once, then you don't have to deal with that document ever again. But all the documents that they don't upload to the website, they would still be responsible for. And so most common would be, meeting minutes and stuff like that they've already have in digital form, but maybe, bank records or emails or something like that they don't normally, capture. They would still have to fulfill that request and go and gather that information and provide that 91A request. But only the things that they actually uploaded, per the archivist requirements would be like, hey, here's the website. You can fulfill that on your own. It's the other things that they would have to still do. So it's kind of incentivizing them to put more on the website so then they have less to do at the local municipality level.
Additional questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
There
My
was
pleasure.
one other person who signed up, does not wish to speak. They were in support. And online, there were 4 in support and 2 opposed. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on House Bill 164. I'll be right back. So we'll be in recess until 9:30. is House Bill 348. And we have the prime sponsor here to introduce the bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Committee. For the record, I am Representative Jennifer Rhodes. I represent the District 17 in Cheshire County, which is Winchester, Richmond, Swansea, Troy, and Fitzwilliam. I am here today to introduce House Bill 348, which intended purpose is to change the guidelines or the law surrounding RSA 165 to have a person be a resident of the town that they are seeking to have public assistance for. So as many of you know, there are guidelines that towns are supposed to establish for their local welfare program. However, within those guidelines, there are, many things that must be done that towns do not have a discretion for. So as far as the residency requirement, when I was doing a little bit of research on this particular law, it kind of dawned on me that, at least in my opinion, considering that this has been probably one of the oldest laws that the state even has, is that, once upon a time in New Hampshire's infinite wisdom, that, the people believed that the people of that community was best to serve somebody of that community. And I just think over time, I think that, the entire program has grown expeditiously. And at least the towns I represent are seeking some kind of relief. So, what we did was, starting at the very first part, we changed where it says whether or not he or she resides there to say in accordance with this chapter, because we were saying that the person has to be a resident. We then defined what could be considered to be proof of residency, whether that be a car lease, whether it be a house lease, etc. And one of the reasons that we also did that is when I know when I went to register my car when I first moved here, they would not accept my new mortgage documents because they said there are so many people that buy property here for the tax benefits, but they don't actually live in the state. Okay, I was new here. I didn't realize that was a thing, but apparently it is. So that was why we, gave the specifications that we had given. More importantly, we really, really tried to keep this all be a may. If your municipality had absolutely no problems with the way things were done and they wanted to keep it that way, great, keep it that way. However, the towns I represent did see an issue with it and wanted to be able to have the option. With that being said, I do understand that there was an amendment, and I did talk with Mr. Marsh in great length, and there were some unintended consequences that have been addressed in the new amendment, Mr. Chairman. And with that being said, with your permission, if I could just maybe touch on a few of those.
That's why I opened the way I did.
Okay. So it was never my intention to, have this become where people were assistance shopping, if you will. And, after my very in-depth conversation with Mr. Marsh, as I was saying, I do believe that that would be an unintended consequence. So in the amendment, I do believe that that is addressed, and I think that is a good thing. Additionally, one of the things that I actually wanted to happen, and it just didn't happen in the amendment, in the bill that you see in front of you, but it is addressed in the new amendment, is the consideration for victims of, fleeing maybe domestic violence. However, I also think that should be addressed. Obviously, that you have to thread a needle. You don't want somebody that's been in a town for, that is no longer in that dreadful situation to just always use that, or that being something that they're told to use. So I do think that is addressed in the amendment. I think that's a great thing. The only thing that I would say that was a little bit confusing to me, with respect, it was something that you guys worked out, is necessarily the intermunicipal hearings. I would think that if residency is established and many of the options that it has been given, I just don't necessarily think that is necessary. However, I have not heard all of the reasons why. So I would, obviously be able to change my mind. And it, at this point is obviously your bill, which I'm aware of. So, and the other part that is a little bit, I guess confrontational is, I do recognize that I think it was last biennium, there was an amendment to this RSA that basically said, town A could go to town B and seek reimbursement if assistance was given to a person that did not reside in their town. And I know for me that caused a lot of confusion whenever I was in this position of being the director in our town, because we did have a few times when towns called and said, we provided assistance, or we were about to provide assistance. And I was like, well, hold on a minute. I have no intentions of reimbursing you anything, because that particular person did not qualify according to our guidelines. And because towns are allowed to set their own guidelines, one town may allow for a car payment where another town may not. So I just think to expect a town, or to say that a town does have to provide reimbursement, I just think it's a slippery slope, because we're getting back into losing that local control over what is best for one town or another. And that pretty much, is it without, going on. I know you guys all have the bill in front
Questions
of you.
from the senators? All right, one question. In
Yes, Mr.
the
Chairman.
amendment, it has a statement in there that a person is found to be a resident in another locality, they will be reimbursed at that locality's rate and not the one that's providing it. Doesn't that take care of your car payment? Because if my rate is nothing for a car payment, then I wouldn't pay you anything.
The answer to that is yes. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, there is one thing that I completely forgot, is we did have where a municipality may set a limit if they choose. That number was taken from the national, from national levels. And again, after, discussions, I think that instead of saying, hey, this is a limit, I think what would be great to be considered, and I don't expect anybody to do my work. So if there's anybody in the committee that would like to discuss it with me and would be willing to amend the amendment, I do think instead of having just a limit, I think it'd be great if we consider an eligibility requirement, given that I don't know of any national program of any that does not have eligibility requirements. So I think that would be something that I would like to see put back in there, just in a different way than it originally was.
Okay, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, as to the order that we're going to take the rest of the people, you're all done.
Thank you.
I'm going to take either Sarah Burke-Cohen first or Todd Marsh first, and the other one last, okay? Because I want them to be able to explain. So you guys pick who's going first and who's going last, and everybody else will be in between, okay?
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
My name is Sarah Burke-Cohen. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. So I'm going to sort of unfold what's going on here. So the New Hampshire Municipal Association, we oppose the underlying bill 348. We agree that the local option of proof of residency is a local option, and we would support that, but we cannot support a cap on monthly assistance. We feel like that would create litigation that would be costly to municipalities, given the fact that there is a question of constitutionality of putting a cap on local assistance due to our New Hampshire Constitution and case law and statutory guidance. We would support the amendment, which is 2026-0775S. It continues to maintain that local option to allow municipalities to choose to adopt in their guidelines proof of residency as part of their eligibility requirements. We think that the guideline, we think the amendment also adds some guidelines when it comes to not putting a cap into place, but offers some guardrails when it comes to how much assistance is offered and how it's offered. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with respect, but my concern is with homelessness,
Okay.
being able to prove that they were residents. And also on the domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, could a municipality say that they haven't reported it? So therefore, we're not taking that as an explanation. If you were in a case of domestic violence and moved, but you never reported it to any entity, would that be would that be a reason for a municipality to say, yeah, we're not believing that?
I guess
Sexual assault
reported to whom?
to police, to whomever enforcement.
Okay.
It's on
Yeah. Are you in
Page
the amendment,
two,
Senator?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
line 28,
On which page?
page 2.
2.
Line 30 has your answer, I believe, Senator, where it talks about, it says with verification from a domestic violence center or service as identified in RSA 173, et cetera.
Right.
So unless they had that, they wouldn't fall into that paragraph.
So that would also include stalking, sexual assault, human trafficking.
It's all that stuff above, I believe.
Okay, I'll verify that. Sure.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Senator.
Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. So we know that there's a Senate Bill 441
Yes.
that came out.
Yeah.
What did we get wrong in that? It came out of committee 5-0. It's on consent.
I think that I am going to sort of answer this, but I will defer that question to the local welfare administrators who will testify at the end of the hearing. I think that part of the issue I think we've talked about, Senator, is when you have a fair hearing process that is based on intent of an individual between municipalities, it could be problematic. How do you prove intent of someone? And if you're having that based on intent, are you really having a fair hearing? Because are you telling me, am I trying to prove an applicant's lying about something? What other evidence would I have for that person's residency, which would be documentation? So if you have municipalities entering into this fair hearing process to try to determine who has, where this person is a resident or was a resident, if if it's just based on intent, there isn't anything to hang a hat on. So then a fair hearing officer is making a decision based on whether they think a person is lying or not. And I think that could be problematic.
Follow up?
Certainly.
And that is a question, right? I mean, and that's the point of a hearing.
Yeah.
And we deal with that here. I mean, not
Absolutely.
that you're lying, but
Wow, Senator Rochford.
but I mean, everyone has a different perspective,
Right.
and you have to kind of ferret that out
Right.
through that. I mean,
So
just
then,
to assume that everyone's going to come in and lie and to promote their I mean, I think that what one person's perspective of reality versus another person, and I think that was the point of that hearing process is to get to that.
I think it could also, I'm not saying people are going to come in lying, but when you have an intent, you need something to back that up, right? So if you're having a fair hearing, then you'd be asking for proof of residency. You'd be asking for, okay, how are you proving this? How are you proving you are here? How are you proving you intend to stay here? How are you proving, there would be something that would be substantial, right? Mm-hmm. And otherwise, you'll have municipalities using the fair hearing process just to argue with each other about intent of a person's intent to stay. Oh, they're intending to stay in Berlin and not in Pittsburgh. Littleton. Yeah. Right. And so then there's this dispute that can't be resolved because well, I don't agree that so and so is their intent is actually that because they have family in Littleton. So why would they come to Berlin? I think
Okay.
that there could be some problems with that, but I'm going to defer your question
Sure.
to our to Todd Marsh. He's the local welfare administrator.
Todd's on warning.
Yeah.
He's got time to figure it out. Thank you.
Additional questions? Somewhere in here is the 72-hour thing, right?
Yes.
In the amendment. And part of that is to give time, as I understand it, to them to sort it out, but make sure that a person in need is not left without any assistance.
That is my understanding as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, going back to the top of the list, Stephen from New Hampshire Legal Assistance.
Mr. Chairman. Morning.
Need a red light. All
Good
right.
morning. There we go. My name is Steve Tower. I am the managing attorney of the Manchester office for New Hampshire Legal Assistance. I'm also the director of our local welfare project. I've been involved in supervising and handling our local welfare cases for many years at New Hampshire Legal Assistance. So I have been involved with discussions around this bill and possible changes to the bill with the Local Welfare Administrators Association for some time now. And my initial concern with the initial bill was a major gap that comes up when a residency requirement is imposed. And I will use a real life example that I have seen. The towns of Northfield and Tilton are very close to each other. Their town halls are about a quarter mile apart. You can see them from each other. And there are going to be situations where somebody has an apartment in, say, Tilton, gets evicted, becomes homeless, stays in a motel in Northfield for a week or so until they run out of money, and then they'll go in and apply in Northfield. Northfield can very reasonably and honestly think that that person is not a resident of Northfield because their last apartment was in Tilton. And so they could say, you're not a resident here, you need to go back to Tilton if there's a residency requirement. And Tilton could look at the facts and say to themselves, but you don't have a current lease here, you don't have a current utility bill here, you're not a resident of Tilton, you haven't been living here for the last week, you've been staying somewhere in Northfield, so you're not a resident here. And so now that family or that individual is not able to access local welfare in either of those towns. And they end up in no man's land and without assistance. And so that's my concern about the residency requirement generally. And I know there was the intent with the 72-hour assistance language with the language that the Local Welfare Administrators Association had been circulating. But unfortunately, I think there's still a gap in that language where if Northfield says, you know, your last apartment was in Tilton, you need to go back to Tilton and apply. We'll give you 3 days of assistance to go and apply in Tilton. If Tilton says you are not a resident here, you don't have a current lease, you don't have a current utility bill, and you've been staying somewhere else, we do not feel that you are a resident here, that person is now without assistance from either town. And the best way for that to be resolved is for the two towns to have a discussion and figure out which one is most likely the town of residence. And that was the intent that myself and Mr. Marsh.
Isn't that the intent in the amendment?
That's the intent in the municipal interdisciplinary or the intermunicipal fair hearing process.
So-
And I believe that that would work.
So let's continue.
Okay. However, the gap that exists with the 72-hour assistance, it says that the individual town can request the fair hearing process, but they're not required to. So in that situation, Northfield is not required to request a fair hearing with Tilton. And if they don't request that fair hearing with Tilton, Northfield no longer has to provide assistance after 3 days. The problem with that is if they request the fair hearing, they have to provide assistance until the fair hearing is concluded, which might be a week. And if they lose that fair hearing, then they have to pay going forward. So there's a massive disincentive for Northfield to request that fair hearing because they're going to have to pay more, possibly much more. And if they don't request that fair hearing, their liability to assist ends at 3 days, and that's it. So if I am the local welfare administrator for Northfield in that situation, why would I ever request a fair hearing if it's going to cost my town more? And that's a gap that I think could be fixed with some additional tweaks to that language. And I have,
We'll ask the welfare directors to trust that at the end of the hearing.
okay. So that I have some draft language that I can circulate that I think would address that situation. The other major sections of the amendment address the guardrails for the financial part. I'm fine with that. I think that's a reasonable change to the law. And then I have a small suggestion about the language about the domestic violence. I would just leave the paragraph almost exactly the same, but remove the 3 words, special consideration shall be granted. Because special consideration it's vague. I think
We're getting so far down the weeds, okay, that trying to address this at this hearing is not appropriate.
Okay.
At the end of this hearing, I will make my office, which is just right straight down the hall, available to you and to anybody else that wants to go. And I'm sure that it's Ms. Cohen and Marsh, because getting these comments now is
I understand,
kind
Senator.
of late in the game, okay? But again, we will try to work them out. And if those 2 individuals at least, and anybody else that wants to go into my office wants to deal with it, then that's fine. But all right,
I understand.
Anything else?
Yes, I the last thing I will say to get out of the weeds, I will say that the broad picture is when you have a residency requirement, there is going to be people where 2 towns can have different opinions about where residency lies. And anytime that happens, if there is a residency requirement in the statute, there are going to be families and seniors who go without assistance. And in the winter here in New Hampshire, up where I was this morning, it was 1 degree this morning. That's a major safety concern for the people that we serve. And with that, I will be happy to take
from any of
questions.
the other senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. Judith Jones?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for your time and thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this issue. And I'm Judith Jones. I am from New Futures, a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization, but also here on behalf of the New Hampshire Alliance for Healthy Aging. And we serve a coalition of more than 500 stakeholders who want to advance healthy aging in New Hampshire. I'd like to just shine a light on how changes in local welfare could impact older adults in New Hampshire. And what you all have heard over and over again at hearings, you already know that New Hampshire's aging, and the only one aging faster is Maine. So I know that you're aware of that. But wondered if you're also aware of the statistics of the group that's going fastest into poverty in New Hampshire, and it's older adults. Other groups in New Hampshire have climbed out of poverty by some measure, but older adults are below pre-COVID. This is the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute. The other group.
We need to talk about
Yes.
the bill and how this relates to the bill.
And why this relates to the bill, and we'll just mention the other statistic, we want to hear about the population that is impacted about the bill, and it is unhoused people. And just want to say for the record that the fastest growing unhoused population are older adults, 1 in 4. So with that as the backdrop of what you lawmakers are facing, want to give an eye to the group of individuals who would need local assistance and go back to a listening session we did in Antrim of older adults facing poverty. And that group told us, we don't like asking for help. We don't want to be here. And who was in this group but retired professionals who had a medical incident and landed in poverty? And that would include a former machinist, a former nurse, a former insurance agent. So when folks ask for help, it's keeping in mind as you look at the amendment, and I appreciate the care and discussion with stakeholders, that you keep in mind that you're facing a group of vulnerable adults with limited ability to get some of the things you're asking. And one takeaway from the listening session was, please don't make it harder for us to get basic needs. So my testimony today is on behalf of that small group in Antrim who needs assistance, and just speaking up for the folks in New Hampshire who are not having an easy time making it.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Sam
you.
Hawkins.
Good morning, Chairman Gray, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. For the record, my name is Sam Hawkins. I'm here today representing NAMI, New Hampshire, in opposition to House Bill 348 and other policies that would make it more difficult for Granite Staters to get assistance when they need it. I want to acknowledge and appreciate the amount of work that has gone into this and to try and help ensure that people can still access assistance if a policy like this were to move forward. But our grave concern lands in how many hoops are just too many to jump through. For our organization, we're thinking about individuals and families impacted by severe mental illness, people who might be coming out of incarceration, residential treatment, hospitalization. They may be in a different community than they were before that. They may not have all of the same resources to get back to that community to prove residency. They might be able to find it, but it might take too long. And essentially, we are asking these people who are at an incredibly fragile point in their lives, when their recovery is at stake, to go through all of this extra work to get the help they need to help them continue on their recovery and hopefully not end up back in jail, back in the hospital, back in treatment, which is costly for them from a health perspective and a financial perspective, but also would be more costly for the community. So with that in mind, we do ask the committee to please oppose these policies and really any policy that would impact this assistance. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. What's your sense of the hearing process? Is that a little more easier for you to handle than the total bill?
I thank you for the question. I didn't get a chance to sneak back and grab a copy of the amendment, but based off what I've been listening to, I'd really just return to the idea of, it's just too much for folks to navigate at this incredibly difficult time in their lives. They're trying to coordinate treatment, medications, reconnect with their community, to have to go through this process, request this process, and continue that. It would really be too much, I would argue, for any of us in our position now to handle, let alone someone in that position. So I don't think it would be good for our folks. No.
Very good. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jennifer, it looks like maybe Chisholm.
So good,
Go ahead.
good afternoon, and thank you for your time. My name is Jennifer Chisholm. I am the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Coalition to End Homelessness and a resident of Manchester. I'm handing out my written testimony about the bill, as well as testimony that was submitted by two Granite Leaders, which is a program that we coordinate for people with lived experience in homelessness. They wanted to submit and asked me to turn in some information that they have and their perspectives on the bill as well. So that's what you'll see in the handouts. So we are as the coalition, we are concerned about the impacts that the bill is going to have. I know people have talked about specific issues. I will sort of stick to the impacts on people experiencing homelessness in the state, whether unsheltered or doubled up, families who are doubled up.
Are you speaking to the bill or to the amendment?
Well, so a little bit of both.
I just need to know when you're speaking to one and when to the other, because
I
it
will-
doesn't do me any good if I don't.
I will be clear. So my initial concern with the bill was that people experiencing homelessness, as I said, either unsheltered or doubled up, do not have access to oftentimes any of the residency requirement documentation that was written into the bill. So no current lease or utility bill. I have 20 years of experience of case management and excuse me, with people experiencing homelessness, including tenant outreach. And so oftentimes people that I was working with did not have cars, and so no registration, or if they did, very often it was not registered to the place where they were currently residing. So some family or friends may have given them some grace and let them use their address in another community. And I appreciate the amendment expands that list of documentations. However, it still limits many individuals and families that are homeless. So just even thinking about a pre-existing relationship with a service provider, in my experience, many times families might not either understand that they're homeless if they're doubled up, and so they're not connected with service providers, or might be fearful of potential consequences from the system. There's a lot of fear oftentimes the DCYF will be involved and they may lose custody of their children. So we know that families with children are often undercounted when we look at homelessness. So that would be a real concern for me. And then I'll also just briefly speak to the 72 hours. I am very concerned about that being not enough time for people to be able to navigate the systems. So again, with 20 years of case management experience, I know how long it often takes me to navigate those systems as somebody with experience doing that. So for people experiencing homelessness who might not have the level of systems knowledge, oftentimes it's going to take them much longer than 72 hours. I don't think that that's a fair amount of time to give people to pull together what they need in order to have access to this extremely necessary help at critical times in their lives. And I thank you for your time.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kaler.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Nick Taylor, Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We're a statewide pro-homes advocacy organization working from homelessness all the way to zoning reforms. And so we also oppose the underlying bill and then the components that include the documentation requirements and then the 72-hour cutoff. It really shifts the burden of proof onto the applicant as opposed to using the fair hearing process. And we're sympathetic to the overall goal of trying to make sure that local residents are getting their services from the local community that they live in. I'm a Manchester resident, Manchester property taxpayer. I know that when you have bigger cities like Rochester or Berlin or Manchester in your district, folks often go there and trying to have a process that ensures that, you know, if you're coming from Bedford to Manchester, that Bedford is the one that is paying for the services. I think that is a totally fair goal for the legislature to take a look at. The issue we have is that burden shifting onto the applicant versus the fair hearing process. And Senator Rochefort, I thought you said, well, at the beginning, bringing up Senate Bill 441, where that was really looking at the fair hearing process. And if there are issues with that process, stay focused there. Don't shift this onto the applicants to make them come up with their documentation or some of the other challenges there that include that 72-hour cutoff. And are sort of specifically to the documentation piece, as has been spoken about, when folks are homeless or they're fleeing a domestic violence situation, having really strict and firm control of all their documents at the ready, easily accessible is really challenging. And that is going to lead to folks who are cut out and left on the street. And so we have deep concerns about that. So I would just encourage the committee to try to narrowly focus on the fair hearing process and not shift that burden onto the applicants.
Questions from the senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 441, you familiar with that?
Vaguely. I was not,
Okay.
throughout this process.
Well,
I have been.
it's the request for a hearing. What is your sense on that?
I mean, having not been through the process, I don't know the specific details about it. My feeling generally is that that is a better approach than putting the burden onto the applicant to come up with the documentation that is needed right within that first 72-hour window. And if there is a disagreement, and if that process, the fair hearing process, is not working as designed, then let's focus our policy efforts on making that more effective and efficient, which I think was the intent of Senate Bill 441, at least the amendment.
Very good. Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak before I bring up Todd Marsh? Todd?
Well, good morning. This is a quaint room.
What we have
Yeah.
for,
Cozy.
well, the LOB is closed, so
Yeah.
hopefully it'll open soon.
Senator Gray, nice to see you. Members of the committee. It's also nice to see my eclectic group of friends behind me. For the record, my name is Todd Marsh, and I'm the president of the New Hampshire Local Welfare Administrators Association, and I'm speaking today on behalf of that association and not for the city of Rochester. I am going to be using my notes as I do represent an association, and I need to be careful with my words.
You need to paraphrase them because you can send us your notes
Absolutely.
and we can read those.
Thank you. So again, Senator Gray, I want to thank you for your collaboration throughout this process. I want to thank Representative Rhodes for recently speaking with me. We did have a long conversation, and I appreciate her receptiveness to think differently regarding the amendment. As Representative Rhodes is aware, our association remains opposed to HB 348 as passed by the House. In the simplest sense, the cleanest path to maintain current law is to maintain current law as is. Current RSA 165 is not without its own challenges, but the existing framework where residency is still largely tied to where a person is and intends to stay remains the most straightforward approach. That said, if there is continued desire to change residency expectations in local welfare and move forward and toward a more documentation-based approach, then that approach needs practical guardrails. That is where Senator Gray's amendment has value and is acceptable to our association, albeit in an uneasy and pragmatic consensus from our board. If greater emphasis is going to be placed on documentation or proof of residency, then the law also has to work in real life. Some people will have paperwork readily available and some will not. The amendment creates a more workable middle ground if needed by seeking documentation when available, attestation when it is not, and temporary emergency assistance when needed. We need to be mindful that human beings, as you are aware, that human beings need to belong somewhere, and mail is not delivered, nor photo IDs issued for under bridges, tents, or railroad tracks. If residency changes are desired, we must allow a reasonable process for untraditional residency situations. That is why the attestation exists. Without these guardrails in place and working together, the system moves too close to document or deny without attestation. The amendment also keeps in place a practical way for municipalities to work through disputes over responsibility, which is an important part of making any tighter residency framework function in a more orderly and humane way. Also, tying allowable assistance amounts to local market rates simply makes sense to avoid extremes on both ends. The intermunicipal hearing language also has value, and we support that language. It has value if that is the only change the legislature wishes to make, and it also has added value as part of a broader amendment. Our concern has simply been that if residency language is tightened more broadly, the rest of the framework needs to function with it. I also want to note the importance of the temporary emergency assistance language, shall versus may. The residency documentation language itself remains a local choice. Because the statute uses may, in other words, a municipality can choose whether to adopt the tighter approach. But if the municipality does choose to tighten residency in that way, then guardrails need to happen. That is why the shall language matters. It creates a more consistent and predictable baseline while meeting a housing emergency regardless of residency or while residency is being sorted out. That balance matters in the domestic violence language as well. If residency expectations are being tightened generally, there must be clear recognition that a person fleeing domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, or human trafficking cannot be treated as though a residency barrier alone should stop immediate assistance. That is the important part of keeping the bill workable and humane. So, our association's position is this. We oppose HB 348 as passed by the House. If current law can remain unchanged, that is the simplest and most straightforward outcome. If there is a desire to address the issue through the intermunicipal hearing language alone, we recognize the value in that narrower approach. But if there is a continued desire to move toward a tighter residency framework beyond that, then Senator Gray's amendment is the more workable and more humane guarded option currently before you. As with many proposals, there is still room for considered improvements and clarifications, and we would be willing to remain engaged in that effort.
Questions?
Any
from the
questions?
senators? Yeah, Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your
Nice
testimony.
to see you.
For an example, Manchester has 39 Beach Street, which is a shelter.
Yes.
And we've given them IDs. We pay for
Mm-hmm.
their IDs. And now those that have a driver's license, on that driver's license, it says 39 Beach Street, Manchester, New Hampshire.
Yep.
To me, that doesn't declare residency because you're in a shelter. Would you agree with that?
Well, I agree with that, and the law agrees with that. So there is a carve out here for RSA 165:1:1C. Under the current law, homeless shelters or warming centers do not constitute residency for local welfare purposes. So a photo ID at for a homeless shelter or warming center would not constitute residency. And that wording is included in the amendment. And I would like to say that I do think it's great that Manchester is doing that because that's a very important micro solution to broader challenges.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. So I brought up earlier the
Yes.
first person that came, 441. Obviously, you're familiar with that.
I am.
You were there.
Yeah.
What did we get wrong with that? Why are we? What do we miss?
Well, I don't think you got it wrong. I think the wording is appropriate. I think that the wording just better fits in 348. I think 348 was, there were, as you are aware, there were two parallel lanes here, 441 and 348. And there were many discussions, knowing that 441 was moving forward. And I believe it was with the vote in the committee. And so I'm convinced that the committee didn't get it wrong. It's just 348 is the better lane for that language because it's tied in to the amendment.
Sure.
So I don't think you got it wrong. I think I think it made sense, and I think that the hearing language. I think there's value in the hearing language if it was to stand alone. However, I think there's more value in the hearing language combined with the entire amendment because, as Sarah had indicated earlier, from NHMA, that without the amendment change, what the fair hearing official would be determining generally is intent without documentation, and that can be done. And again, if the committee moved forward with that alone or the Senate, I think there is value there. I think there are situations, you mentioned it earlier, where if a person is in a homeless shelter and goes to the city of Manchester and seeks local welfare assistance, if the hearing language alone was available, then Charlene from Manchester certainly could pursue that hearing. But they would be pointing to this person's in a homeless shelter, and the RSA indicates this does not constitute residency. I would hope that that town B would understand that, and it perhaps wouldn't go to a hearing, right? So there's value in the hearing language alone, but I think if the committee, if the Senate prefers a more tightened residency, I think that the hearing language certainly works with that, because the hearing officer would have something to point to. Well, your ID says this, but we're seeing this. Without that wraparound language, except for the homeless shelter or corrections facilities or substance use disorder centers, that's all in the law. With those exceptions, it would be primarily about intent alone. And if I was a fair hearing officer, although I would probably try not to be, but if I was a fair hearing officer, that would be challenging. And under current law, I think the reality is, again, except for homeless shelters and those helping facilities, I think Town A would lose the fair hearing 90% of the time if the person says, yes, I came over from here, but I'm here now and I've been here for 24 hours and I intend to stay. Right? And if that community says, but you've only been here for 24 hours or an hour, they take it to a fair hearing based on current law. Based on current law. I think that municipality would likely lose if they say, I intend to stay here because, I don't want to go over there because, that welfare official is nasty. Or, so I think there's value in the wording, whether it's alone or whether it's part of this wraparound amendment.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no additional questions, I'm going to send you guys out to my office to battle this out. But on page 2, line 31, due to residency, it should be DUE instead of DO. On line 36, where it's got individuals, that should, I think the apostrophe should come out so that it's not possessive. And then on line 29 on page 3, the, another. So we need to take out the. Okay? And with that, we'll close this public hearing. You guys know where my office is? If you don't, just walk down the hall and keep walking. Tell Deb that I sent you in there. Anyone else that wants to attend with them should go. And for all of you, the reason I said that it's late in the game is because I got 441 and I've got this bill competing, and I have a time limit that I can do 441, and I don't want to send both bills forward, and I want to send the right bill forward. So that's why I'm asking you to go down to my office and work the sucker out to come back to me. All right? Thank you.
Oh, if people go to your office is big enough.
And they're going to have to stand around. All right. Our next hearing is on House Bill 244. I don't see any representatives here to introduce the bill, or
I'll introduce it. John is on the next bill, but sure.
Come on up. I just don't recognize you, apparently, Representative. If you don't want to do it, we got somebody else we can do it. Go ahead, Representative.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Representative John Sellers from Grafton District 10, Bristol and Bridgewater. I'm just going to introduce Bill 244, HB 244, to the Senate, and it's regarding of updating the building codes and fire codes. And I just want to introduce it because the main sponsors are not here right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll go right to the list. We have NHHBA. Philip. We got two Phillips. You know, that's right at the top of the list here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It'll be this one will be a little bit quicker than your last one. Hopefully, get you guys back on track. So HB 244 is essentially just taking a lot of building code RSAs that were scattered throughout state law and condensing them into 155A. Thanks to the chairman of the BCRB, Phil Sherman, a lot of this work has already been done. I think he does have one amendment to fix just a couple little references that were missed, but I'll let him talk about that. And that's all I have. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows
Questions
it.
from the senators? Thank you very much. Philip, number two. I'm not going to judge.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Philip Sherman. I'm chair of the Building Code Review Board. This bill attempts to vacuum up the building code boards of appeal, building official type issues out of what I'll call the 670 series, which is the broader land use, zoning, planning, and everything else. There has been a major amount of confusion in the field, particularly because many building inspectors wear two hats, where they're also the zoning official in a smaller town. We attempted to do this by simply taking things that were unique to building codes and moving them to 155A, taking things that applied to both building and I'm just going to refer to it as zoning in the broader sense, and leaving them there, but editing them to get the building code stuff out and then copying it over into 155A and editing it as needed there. There's a lot of paper in this bill, but the intent is simple. We work with the Municipal Association and with the Building Officials Association. We've had no objection to this at all. And I think we've got it pretty well banged into shape. I do have one brief amendment which simply corrects some cross-references that we found errors with. There's just a horrendous number of cross-references here.
No.
We okay?
He gets the stack.
Sorry.
She's taking notes.
No idea. I'm not going to, as you recommended to the previous speakers, I'm not going to read my notes here. We did start this process with last year's HB 428, and that goes into effect July 1st. It is somewhat important that this bill go into effect on July 1st. We have three bills that all hit that day, and we have them sort of synced to not override each other. But we're playing with the same statute. So I'm happy to walk through this bill with you.
Yes, let's go.
You want to go through section by section, or?
No, I want to go through the changes that you want to make.
Those changes that I just distributed simply correct some cross-references.
That's what I want to do. I want to go through those.
Okay.
Tell me the page and the line number.
Somebody needs to give me back a copy, please. Thanks. I'll apologize. I do not have the page and line numbers on the amendment. So in part number 4, which is page 2, starting on line 18, that just corrects again a previous reference to 674.51, which goes away and turns it into a reference to 155A. It also corrects the term building inspector to building official, which is the term that's used throughout the documents at this point. There are three references.
Questions from the senators on that one? Okay,
And
seeing
then
none,
part 7
let's-
is on page 3, starting at the top of the page. And again, that simply corrects a previous reference in the bill to 155A1 and clarifies that it's part 11.
Questions from senators on that one? Okay, continue.
And then part 8 following that, starting on line 12, it does the same thing. It just takes 155A1 and adds the part 11, Roman numeral 11 to it.
Questions from senators on that one?
And
Seeing
then
none,
in
continue.
part 8, paragraph 10, Roman numeral 10. Again, that's a shift from a reference to 674, which goes away, or 674.31, and shifts it to the proper 155A reference.
Questions from the senators? Okay.
And that is it for this proposed amendment.
All right. Anything else? Any questions from the senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. My concern is with sprinkler suppression. Is there any current changes that affect, because I know in the city of Manchester, we work with the fire marshal to get, we don't have to 100% sprinkle a four-story building.
The intent of this bill was to not make any material changes. No authority for anybody to do anything was shifted. It was just, we just moved the sections. We did find conflicts because much of the stuff in the 670 series was a holdover from prior to 2002 when every municipality adopted their own building code. And then we have a state building code. The one thing that we did clarify, which was clarified in other statutes, is that local municipalities do not adopt building codes, they amend the state code. That seems to flow fairly well, and it was a fairly simple change. In terms of the sprinklers, there's another bill in front of, it's a House bill, so it's here someplace, 1004, which does change some of the sprinkler requirements, but there's nothing that's changed here. The prohibition on both state and local amendments that would require 1 and 2 family dwelling sprinklers is, I'm not sure it's even in here because it's still in the statute. But none of that has been changed with this bill.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? There were 2 people who signed up online, opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. We'll start the next one in just a minute. Okay, and we'll open public hearing on House Bill 173. Go for it.
All right, good morning, Senators. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Representative John Sellers from Bristol. I represent Bristol and Bridgewater, Grafton 10. A year ago, I brought this, basically this bill to introduce because of situations that have happened in my town, and I'm sure they've happened in a lot of towns. And that is, you go and the petitioners go and do all the work, grab the signatures that they need, submit the petition, and then they go to a deliberative session just to have what they expected to have a vote on eventually at the ballot ending up to be a study vote instead of a vote on the actual matter. So this is why this was brought forward, because there's been changes throughout the times, and it's not just my town, it's happened every town. It does, it depends, who's there at that time. But I mean, if you look at RSA 4013 4C, you have to think about it. Say, this was put in here because of a reason. And initially it was because, someone was probably eliminating the subject matter. That's one thing they were doing. So what I did is I asked to say, let's do this, to make a change so someone can't, or to make a change to the purpose of a petition warrant article. So that means they can't change the purpose of the warrant article, the petition one. Now, and if you go back, this was actually retained at the House because they went back and forth many times and thinking about, well, is it purpose or is it intent? Purpose and intent, and they went back and forth. So they ended up retaining it and thinking about it at that point. And, just this morning, I went and looked up just to make sure I was clear on what a purpose is versus an intent is. A purpose is an aim or a goal, all right? Where the intent is an aim or purpose. So the intent points to the purpose. The purpose actually points to the aim or goal. And the goal of a petition warrant article is to bring it to the voters, to allow the vote, to have the voters decide up or down if this is a good petition warrant article or not. And that's what it's supposed to happen. And of course, we all know what warrant articles are. I mean, they're there to be placed on the ballot to have a vote on the budget, appropriations, or even policy, and this being policy. So think of it this way. I have, in our town, we have a small downtown area. We have about 30, 40 parking spaces, and we have rental units there. Someone brings a petition warrant article to ask the town people if they could use 5 or 7 spaces for overnight parking for those tenants. All right. And what happens, it ends up going to town meeting, or actually an SB2 in this case. And the SB2 town says, well, we're going to change that to a study instead of actually allowing the people to have a vote to see if this is the right thing or not. Now, they should be able to go in and actually have the vote, and put it on the ballot and let the people decide. Now at the SB2 or deliberative session, if they want to change it to 5 spaces or 8 spaces, that's permissible. We're not taking that away. There's nothing else we're taking away on this 4013 4C. We're actually adding, if you think about it, we're actually saying to those that have done the petition work that your ballot, your petition will be actually put on the ballot for the people in your area to decide. And with that, I don't want to take up more time or anything like that, but I think it's a worthwhile matter, and that the petition should go, the change here that I'm asking or requesting, that the purpose of a petition warrant, this is only a petition warrant article, that the petition can't be changed. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Senator Russer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you talked about the rental units and parking. Is that an actual example, or do you have an actual example that you could share with us where the purpose deviated from the subject matter of a petition warrant article?
I could give you, thank you for the question. I could give you a couple examples, but that was one.
Okay.
All right. But another one was, for an example, we had in our district, someone brought forth that to remove multi-tier system of support, that the schools would no longer use that. And they changed it to a study, and then it was on the ballot as a study. And of course, when it was on the ballot as a study, people didn't really care at that point, and it was voted down. So,
additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
thank you for your time.
Tim from Northwood.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to speak.
You need a red light.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tim Jandeber. I'm from Northwood, New Hampshire, and I'm here to speak in favor of House Bill 173. I think it's very important. We're given the right to petition, and we do sometimes when we think it's important. And I do have a very, very good example of what I'm talking about, why this bill should pass so that they can't change things. So 32 RSA 3214 gives us the right to petition to rescind the town's budget committee. It appeared to us that 39.3 says that we can put in the petition and they can make minor adjustments for language, but they cannot change the intent, which they did. So they changed, the selectmen at the deliberative changed the word rescind to reaffirm, and they took out all of the references to the RSA. So they completely reversed what we were trying to do. And it's just quite irritating, to be honest with you. I did come in and speak to the Secretary of State, a wonderful guy. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that I can come into this state, and be able to talk. So he said he thought maybe there was enough wiggle room, and so I'm here. I hope that HB 173 takes out that wiggle room. And I appreciate the time to come in and speak to this issue.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Brody.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for taking my testimony this morning. Again, for the record, Brody DeShays, I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to House Bill 173 as introduced. So House Bill 173 would prohibit petition warrant articles in SB2 municipalities or school districts from being amended by the legislative body at the business session, so the voters. Again, SB2 towns are those using the official ballot referenda of annual meeting under RSA 40:13 and some other sections of the statutes. Our position is that petition warrant articles should be treated no differently than any other warrant article. The only difference between a petition warrant article and any other warrant article is just the matter for how it's placed on the warrant. The legislative body, the voters at annual meeting, should be the ones that determine the substance of the question that's ultimately voted on, just like at any traditional town meeting. It should be treated the same in SB2 towns or traditional annual meeting towns. Just like the legislation that any legislator may introduce in the general court, petition warrant articles in their final language are under the purview of the legislative body once introduced and may be subject to change. That's how it's always been in the history of our town meetings across this state. Petition warrant articles, again, they deserve no more legal protection than others, and they aren't referendums on matters under the purview of the governing body. They're mostly for either changing an appropriation for a specific job, position, other thing, or adding an appropriation, or other things that the legislature has determined I should say the state has determined is within the purview of the legislative body to weigh in on as a policy decision. Ultimately, I'll add the word purpose is also extremely vague and could be interpreted in many ways. And we've discussed difference between purpose and intent. Our position is that purpose is what's written in the warrant article, but very often you might have petitioners bring forward a warrant article that clearly you can read its purpose and interpret it, but their intent was much different. What this bill would effectively do is, even if you have petitioners that agree that the purpose of the warrant article wasn't meeting their intent, and everyone in the legislative body agreed and said, yes, we should amend this language, they would be prohibited from doing it, which would be an absurd result in the law. Ultimately, again, what purpose is would have to be determined by a moderator on a case-by-case basis and could be applied by some moderators differently than others, meaning that towns and their moderators and their legislative bodies would be interpreting purpose much differently at each annual, or I should say the business session at each annual town meeting in SB2 school districts and municipalities. So with that, I'll be happy to conclude my testimony and answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Lang.
So Brody, what about the petitioners themselves who brought the petition, right? They brought a petition to seek an outcome and a vote of the citizens, and their request is completely perverted to something that they didn't request and they didn't sign their name to. How do you feel about those guys?
Thank you for the question, Senator Lang. I think the process is the same for them as it would be for the governing body. There are times where governing bodies introduce warrant articles, and the intent of those warrant articles are completely changed by the legislative body. Ultimately, it's the legislative body who should make that determination for any warrant article, whether it originates from the governing body or it's petitioned. There are, as you're probably aware as a moderator, there are many times where people stand up at the annual meeting during the business session and they request that a appropriation be changed to $1, which effectively nullifies the warrant article. It happens, and that's part of the democratic process locally in New Hampshire that makes annual meeting unique but great.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shaka?
Hello, my name is Jacob Hua. I live in Grafton, and I am supporting this bill. Support of this bill. First, I'd like to address the point that was brought up regarding the moderator. Currently, under the bill, the subject matter cannot be changed. What the subject matter is also a point of that is just as vague. So this wouldn't change at all the call of the moderator of does it include in the purpose or not. The moderator still needs to do that if it's under the subject matter or not. I'd like to go back to some of the years past and how we came here today. Originally there's a few lawsuits, a few petitions in court that already are on the subject. One of them, the first one that came to court was when at deliberative session, they removed the entire article and only left to C. So it was to C. I don't remember exactly what that was trying to accomplish, but they removed the entire language and left only to C. The court at the time found that it was an okay in the same way with the theory of in the same way that you could zero down an amount, you could also remove the entire language to C. Following year, the law was changed to add that the subject matter will be that you can't change the subject matter, so you don't have that kind of situation. There's been a few lawsuits since on this, and the courts still see the current way the statute is that it's ambiguous. So anytime this comes to court, the court goes and interprets what the legislator meant. Currently, they're looking at the fact that the legislator, the state did not adopt something as of this bill. So the court's looking at it as, even though there wasn't a vote, the vote down to not pass that amendment, the courts are currently looking at that as interpretation that the legislative body does not want that they intend. So I mean, the problem with that is that currently where it stands, it's neither here or there, but I'll take that back. Currently where it stands is that the courts, even though there was nothing that passed, the courts are still looking at that as a decision. I am currently, I have a petition at Superior Court on this exact topic. You go out, you get the 25 signatures. It sounds low, but when you consider that only 1 out of 5, 6 people actually signing it in a small town, you're talking to 100, 150 people. So you go out in winter, door knocking, going into talking to people that you're standing. I stood all day at the transfer station most of the day. I mean, it takes a lot of time. The selectmen, all they got to do is sit at a meeting and say, let's put this on the warrant. Boom, it's on the warrant. It takes a lot of time and investment for people to put something on as a petition warrant article. So you go to deliberative, and it's changed so drastically that tells you, well, what was the point? Why did I do all this work? Nothing came of it. The whole thing was just completely changed, and that's a problem. I think it brings down the voter engagement, because if you try to go ahead and do that, it just could be nothing that comes off of it. So I think I think it's still as it was proposed at the moment is still a little vague. I think the court, another one, if this was to be accepted, it would go to court, and the court would still look at it as, well, the term purpose is still ambiguous. So I think it does necessitate more specific language on. I don't have an exact suggestion of what that would be, but it needs a better language, because I think even with this change, it will go to court, and it will be in the same place. Another thing you need to consider, that not that many people come out to deliberative, and often you find that a large portion of the people at deliberative have a stake in what happens. So if you're talking about school districts or towns, a lot of them work at the school or have family at work at the school. A lot of these things are protect financial interests. So when you have a quarter or of the people that are actually sitting on boards or work there, it's not that just these are ordinary people discussing what's best for the town. Is these are people who have a specific interest in trying to get this warrant article changed completely, so they don't need to deal with this, and that's often what happens. I can give specific examples from court cases that went, but if that's somebody's interested.
If one of the senators wants those, they can ask for it.
Okay.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Online signups, so there's 6 in support, 2 opposed, and there was no one else that signed up on the sheet. So we'll close the public hearing, and
Will we go into executive session?
we'll have a motion to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. We are in executive session. Do we want to take up the bills we took today first?
I'd like to take up HB 244 and make a motion.
We have a motion on HB 244.
I move auto pass, and then a follow-up motion of adopting the amendment that was proposed that changes the appropriate references.
Senator Lang moves ought to pass.
Second.
Then we have a second. Senator Roachford, we have a motion for a committee amendment. And
Jessica, you have that.
Senator Lang and seconded by Senator Roachford.
Yes.
Okay, and the committee amendment is detailed on the sheet that was provided. Questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the committee amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. All those in favor of the bill ought to pass as amended, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it.
Move consent.
We have a motion for consent. Any objections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'll take that one out. I do want to have a discussion on the last one we just heard. Whether we like it or not, the deliberative process is part of our heritage, our current process, etc. The fact that people attend or don't attend, not attending, it makes, it's a sad thing. We've heard this bill many times before, in various forms over the last 14 years that I've been here, either as a representative or here. So it puts me in a situation where, we've got this deliberative session that can make changes, but we don't want them to be able to do something just because 25 people or whatever say, I want to do something different. They certainly can have their way with it if they show up at the deliberative session. So I'm not saying I support it or oppose it right now, but I want you guys to have that conversation. Where are you? You live in a city, it's hard for you to understand the deliberative process sometimes.
Right.
And
Yeah, I understand the frustration. I certainly have witnessed that firsthand. But what I tell people is get out, turn out to the deliberative session. You know, if it's important to you, be there. And I've been dealing with one of my towns right now where this went sideways, and they got it on the ballot, and then no one came out to the deliberative session to defend it and to speak to it, and they dropped the ball, and that's that's kind of where it all ended. And I think about the stuff that we do here. I don't know if there's anyone around this table that has put in a bill that went to committee and got completely turned around from what the original intention. I think there was a squirrel bill a few years ago, something like that. And that's again, I can empathize with the intent here, but I think that's part of the process.
Further comments?
Yeah, I don't know if the intent of the 25, the people that got the 25 signature, I sort of lean towards them. It appears that a deliberative session could be a vote prior to the actual vote, which I'm a little complicated on.
Well, in fact, it is.
It is.
Okay.
That the deliberative session is kind of, in my estimation, there so that things that were brought up can be discussed at least first before they're actually the thing you're going to vote on is put onto the ballot so that you can get there. Okay. And there's not a whole lot of restrictions on what you can and can't do in a deliberative session. Okay. And certainly, I feel for the people that go out and get the signatures, but the deliberative session is part of the process. And if you want your thing to pass, you got to get those 25 people to show up, because in most cases, that deliberative session, unless there is something that, is really upsetting to a lot of voters, they just don't show up. And having those 25 people show up, you can have exactly what you wrote. So, further comments?
Yeah, I think it's problematic purpose. That opens up to anything. Change the purpose of the petition warrant article. That complicates it.
All right. Does anybody want to put this thing on hold for a week, or do you want to make a motion, or what do you want to do?
Mr. Chair, so
yeah,
I have a lot of compassion for the 25 people that put out an issue that they felt was important, did the work to go do it. And especially when I hear that selectmen are making changes to invert and pervert the initial intent of the bill, or the prevent, because as we all know, living in small towns, there's a little bit of power in your selectman's office and in your town clerk's office, and the ability to shift something that's not liked by a few into the people don't really get a vote on what was the original topic causes me concern that they don't get the right to have their say in court, so to speak, and have that petition warrant article as it was written or slightly amended. I agree with we know that you can change appropriations amounts in warrant articles. Selectmen always have the right to put a warrant article on a bill whenever they want, right? They can just vote as a select board to add something to your town meeting warrant and have it on there. And for them to turn around and pervert a petition warrant article when they get to put their own in, if they don't like it, they can put their own in, just seems non-democratic. How does the minority get their voice heard, so that people can have a choice? So I'm struggling with this one. I like the bill for the purpose of, no pun intended, but the purpose of getting that voice heard. Whether you don't like what they petitioned, you just vote no, right? But you don't get to pervert what they petitioned for and put those people. So I'm struggling with this bill. I kind of like the original intent of the bill of getting that minority heard. If they went to the work to put it on the ballot and do what they needed to do, they should be heard and not have the reason they brought it completely changed. I know we read about one this year. There was a petition warrant article to change, I put a tax cap in of CPI, and they changed it to 33%. that the budget could be, that the tax cap was 33% over the previous year, which was not the intent of the people that were trying to manage the budget, but that was the change at the deliberative session was voted in. And that was what was on the warrant article, creating a tax cap of 33%. So,
All right, we'll put this one on hold. I do want to go back and read RSA 4013 to look at it, to see who can and can't change it. I don't think that the selectmen ought to get a 1-0 vote. I agree with that. But if it's done in deliberative session, that is, according to our procedures, the places to make changes to that. So that'll be on hold for at least a week. All right. We have 348, which is not going to get done unless those guys come back. And we got 164. 164 was the records retention.
we could hold that. I'd like to hear from the Secretary of States. They weren't around. I'd like to have, see if we can get them to come in during exec to talk to us about this.
The thing that bothers me about this one is I didn't get any clerks in here testifying. I didn't get anybody from the Secretary of State's in here, and I got an appropriation of over $100,000, which I think is low, depending on what they're going to do. And if it goes to finance, the chair of finance has told me he's not wanting to spend money on that. Okay, so let's pick the bills, the other bills. Okay. $158. I think that we're going to ask Senator Lang to do some work on this bill.
Mr. Chair, what I'll do is what I'd like to see have done is the Secretary of State will just send a list of the top 20 addresses that received absentee ballots over to the election integrity unit of the AG and let them do an investigation to determine, rather than this whole process that's laid out here. It'll strictly be at the end of the election. They'll run a report and take the top 20 addresses statewide that are receiving absentee ballots and refer those to the Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit for an investigation to see if there's any inappropriate behavior on these election absentee ballot requests.
I don't know that I would say 20, as a flat number. The top 20 or those considered to be receive a significant number of ballots or something.
I'll work on that amendment.
Yeah. Okay. Questions, comments on that? Okay, moving on. 281. And in 281, we deal with some of the same issues that we dealt in the last one. And that's lines 17 through 19, the bold text. And if we try to do anything with this bill, since we're already doing it in the other one, I would say that there would be a committee amendment to remove that bolded text there. Having the bill in a sortable fashion, certainly I believe that is just a matter of hitting the right button, but hey, it's another one that we
Mr.
should
Chair,
probably ask us.
I'll move OTP.
Okay. OTP from Senator Lang.
Second that.
Senator Rutherford.
Mr. Chair, as a committee amendment, I'd ask that we strike from lines 17 to 19, starting with the word "if the absent ballot was," the bolded text. Strike that as a committee amendment.
Okay, Senator Lang moves committee amendment.
I'll second that.
Richard seconds. Does everybody understand the committee amendment? All right, all those in favor of the committee amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Any further comments on the bill as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Have a motion for
Move
consent.
consent.
Is there any objections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And,
I can do that. Or you want
I
to give
haven't-
long?
I haven't given Senator Long a bill in a long
All right.
time.
Okay, I'll do it.
We're
Long
gonna give
time for
that
long.
Senator Long. And he voted yes on all of those. Okay. 317. 317, you have an amendment in front of you. 0898S. In the questions that you asked during the regular session and the talks that we've had, it appeared that this committee wanted to preserve the ability to have the supervisor, the checklist, the moderator, and the clerk be able to say, yep, I know him. Trying to reach that middle ground. What this amendment does is put in that they can, but it adds a form where they need to attest to that they know him. Certainly, we do not want a rogue clerk, moderator, or supervisor of the checklist certifying people because they don't agree with the law. And that is what has been reported has happened in some locations. In the words of Senator Lang privately to me, he said, we're going to make all of those communities pay for the bad actions of one or two towns. Unfortunately, that's the way it is going south. So this one has a person attest under the penalty of perjury that they know the person, and they'll copy down the person's name and the voter ID. It has to be somebody that's on the checklist already. Okay? If they're not on the checklist when they walk in, they wouldn't qualify for being certified by those people. All right. And the reason for that is that we've already taken away the affidavit stuff for new registrants or whatever. And if a person just moves into a particular municipality, it is less likely that any of these people would know that person. It may not be that way, but, I can only go so far. All right. And then they would have to say how they know the person. All right. And then one of the other election officials, either the moderator or the clerk, would have to attest that they believe that that was done in accordance with the law. So with that, I will move ought to pass. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And I will move amendment 0898S. Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any discussion on the bill as amended?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So, well, I loathe the idea of putting more paperwork on an election day in front of the moderator and town clerk or the supervisor checklist to do. I'll support this. I do believe that if we have an issue with one or two town clerks, then we should direct the Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit to go out and verify those problems rather than impose a new rule on the other 233 towns that are doing it right. But that's not what's before us, and so I'll support I'll support this bill. But I do think that we should consider, if we know this is happening or if we believe this is happening, that the chair of the Election Law Committee write a letter to the Election Integrity Unit and ask them to verify or check to see if this problem is truly happening in those communities that were reported.
I have in fact talked to, because between the AG and Secretary of State, there's one state official that shows up at all the polls. all right, election day. And I have asked them to, and the problem is that there is no way for that person to know whether they know that person or don't know that person. And so that's gets to be my problem. And that's why, having in here a line that says how you know them, and the moderator or clerk, because I don't put the supervisor checklist on that bottom portion, that they would actually have to say, yep. Okay, so you're going to at least have two officials, that are certifying these people. And now that we have the forms, we can also go back and we'll know how many they did certify, because I don't have a way of knowing how many they certified other than looking at and see if the driver's license is in there or whatever. So, okay, any other comments? We're voting on the bill as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We have
Move consent.
we have a motion for consent. Any objections? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I will take that one out also. Okay. House Bill 463. My comments from the last time is it needs work. I don't like the way they structured this. I think that the moderator and or the clerk should be the ones that identify the people on the board of recount. That it does not need to be school board members. It does not need to be selectmen. It needs to be people who, can be elected officials, doesn't have to be election officials. So unless somebody,
I'll move ITL.
okay, we have a motion of ITL.
Second.
So Jaron, I'll just talk about some quick mechanical problems with the bill. For some reason, it's school district elections. We're having the select board be the recount officials, even though it may be a multi-district town. That's good. A school district, that could be problematic. And then the second half of the bill, when we're talking about town elections, we're having the school board be the verification of the town elections. It doesn't seem to make any sense. And so there's some mechanical defects with the bill. And ITL, I think, is the appropriate motion.
Okay, we have a motion of ITL. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it.
Move consent.
Okay, do we have any objection to consent? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. And Senator Lang, you get that one. All right, I'm gonna put us in recess for a couple of minutes because I want to go in the office and see what's going on with the other bill. I was hoping that we would get that one done today, but so we will be in recess for 10 minutes.
Right.
Get your mic.
Bye.